Whew. I have I've rewritten this draft maybe 5 times. Maybe this will be good. Okay. Have you ever noticed how every story is inherently just fan fiction and nothing is new under the sun? Like, Lord of the Rings is Norse myth fan fiction. All of Marvel and DC's prominent comic storylines are just AUs or extensions of Propagandaverse comics. There's an entire period in Western European history where everyone was making fan art and AU fanfiction of Greek and Roman myth and the Bible. All of shonen anime can be rooted back to the journey to the West. We have an entire archive on the internet of tropes and fiction that humans have used since time immemorial. And if someone isn't basing on fiction, they are basing on their own life. I could keep going. Humanity is inherently self-referential because we write what we know, and despite our curiosity and yearning for knowledge, we want complex and hard-to-grasp facts and concepts to be explained simply enough to be understood by our tiny human brains. Myths came about this way. They explain how certain concepts came to be in ways people understood. How the ocean was born, why the sun and the moon are like that, where we came from, love, death, childbirth, law, propriety. And as oversaturated the media is of references to Greek gods, I'm going to have to add on to the pile. What the hell is with Hadestown, and why is it so compelling? Hi, SJ here. New look, new vibe, a lot of it weird, don't worry about it. Anyway, first things first, let's get our disclaimers out of the way. I was not paid to make this. If you like it and care enough about the shit I'm talking about, it would be so very, very sexy if you supported me on Ko-fi. I will be talking about all 3 iterations of Hadestown readily available on the internet, as well as all the media associated with it. So yes, I will be tapping into the innate mythology kid in me. Spoilers for Hadestown and Greek myth, I guess. Addendum, I will be referring to the concept album version as the concept album version. The New York Theater Workshop version as the live recording or live version, and the Broadway version as the Broadway version, because, you know, we have to get that out of the way. I am not in any way, shape, or form informed or inherently interested in all forms of theater, including musicals. I just really like Hadestown. Yeah, take with that what you will. All references will be up in the cards or down in the description box. Or both. Mostly to videos, anyway. So, what in the hell is Hadestown? Well, Hadestown started as a stage production in 2006. Anaïs Mitchell, its creator, toured with fellow musicians and performed it around her home states as her own theater project. It was turned into a folk concept album in 2010. In 2012, the project was picked up by Rabel Chafkin of The Great Comet of 1812 fame and was adapted into a stage musical. They opened in 2016 to perform 3 months off-Broadway at the New York Theater Workshop. I will continue to stumble over that. They went pre-Broadway immediately after, recording a 2016 live performance of the New York Theater Workshop and releasing it the following year to promote their run. There was an Edmonton run in 2017, a West End run in 2018, before they finally opened on Broadway in 2019, releasing the Broadway cast recording the same year. Oh, you mean the play. Alright. Hadestown grabs the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice and the myth of Hades and Persephone by the necks and bonks them together into a very compelling story. We have the story of 4 characters framed and accompanied by the audience, Hermes, and the Fates. Orpheus and Eurydice live during a recession and are either unemployed or working not to be. The winters and autumns are getting longer, the summers are getting hotter, springs are getting shorter. Everyone is going down to Hadestown to earn big and keep living. Hungry and out of options, no matter what album you're listening to, Eurydice is enticed by Hades to work at Hadestown, and she chooses to leave against her better judgment. Another constant is that Orpheus is writing a song about Hades. This just so happens to coincide with the fact that Eurydice gets whisked away by the man himself. Hermes, our narrator, tells Orpheus to go to Hadestown if he wants to go find her. On the flip side of this is that Hades and Persephone are having trouble in paradise. Hades has forgotten about the love he has for his wife and has become a workaholic, and Persephone, to match him, has become a bit of an alcoholic. I don't know about trouble. They seem like they're getting along swimmingly, to be honest. You know, that's more than what my own parents do. Anyway, it's all fine and dandy in Capitalism Town until Eurydice realizes that in going there, she has lost her humanity and Orpheus. Which is convenient, because that's when Orpheus arrives. Hades tells him to leave. Persephone tells Hades to suck it up and fucking listen to someone for once. Hades relents, because he also loves his wife. Orpheus sings his song. Hades is reminded that he loves his wife very much, and realizes why Orpheus is so determined to get Eurydice back, because he also loves his wife very much. Orpheus fixes their marriage, and Hades very reluctantly lets him try to get back to the surface with Eurydice. And I say reluctantly, because if Orpheus manages to break Eurydice's contract just like that, bada bing, bada boom, his workers are going to think, oh, we could just leave too. So he makes it deliberately hard for Orpheus, who loves his wife very much. No turning around, or she's gone forever. And he turns around. And the story ends there, and the story beats you over the head for expecting anything else. It's like your grandma's house opening a random tin of biscuits in the middle of the living room. What, did you expect actual biscuits? Of course it's a sewing kit. What's your point?
My point is
that Hadestown is an amazing fanfic, and this is my AO3 comment on why it's an amazing fanfic. Part 1. Eurydice's Choice. Any review you watch of this musical is going to praise how much of the story is transformed by the addition of Eurydice's agency. Polyphonic did it.
The changes to Eurydice also help modernize the myth by giving her agency. She is the one choosing to go to the underworld, rather than dying tragically to serve Orpheus's character arc.
Shafrilla did it.
The second neat change is that the women are given more agency. Persephone chooses to follow Hades since she was legitimately in love with him, and Eurydice chooses to go to Hadestown as a means of survival, rather than just kinda accidentally getting killed and becoming a plot device in Orpheus's quest.
I'm doing it, but seeing as neither of those people were assigned female at birth, I'm going to have to tear them down. I'm kidding. Half kidding. What I'm not kidding about is how much change it underwent per actor, and how her pragmatism ended up setting the story rolling. In the original myths, Eurydice is a nymph who dies at her and Orpheus's wedding day. Whether or not this is because of someone else, it doesn't really matter. She literally just dies, and the entire myth of Orpheus going to the underworld was brought about by Orpheus's willing to undergo the trials and tribulation of getting her back. Hadestown Eurydice is surprisingly existent, complex, and incredibly human. In the concept album, she was the one more worried about where they were going to get the things they needed to sustain themselves through the winter. Her choice to leave isn't made in contempt, it's made in necessity, and they expanded on this the further they adapted it. In the live album, Eurydice and Orpheus have a conversation about the promises they made to each other. She promised to stay by his side so long as he provided them food to lay on the table. They added another stake to Eurydice wanting to marry Orpheus because he promised that he'd be able to keep the seasons from turning too soon. The summers are getting hotter, the springs are getting shorter. He promised her that he'd be able to change the seasons with just a song, that he was just confident he could do it as long as she stayed with him. And for a moment she believed him, the poor gal, because he didn't get to keep that lofty promise. They didn't get married either. They were remorseful for having separated, but that never would have erased the fact that it was fair for them to have left each other in the first place. In the Broadway version, Eurydice is a lot more abrasive, Orpheus is a lot more humble. I don't know why they made that change, but I appreciated the laughs it got out of me when Orpheus just ended up being such a dumbass sometimes.
Don't come on too strong. Come home with me.
But how did you get here? On the train?
No, I walked.
The biggest change for Eurydice's choice in the Broadway version was the addition of a number from Anaïs Mitchell's album Zoa, called Any Way the Wind Blows, the tune of which they used for Promises when they added it for the workshop, but the song of which they didn't add until the Broadway show. The addition of this song informs us not only of Eurydice's motivations as a character, but also informs us that Hadestown isn't Orpheus' story, it's Eurydice's. Whoa, SJ, hot take. But consider this. Am I fucking wrong? Think about it. It's the first song after the intro. It gives us an insight of what the direction of the story is going to be. We go through Orpheus's proposal, their partnership, her journey to Hadestown, and how her presence greatly affects the denizens of Hades. And she is the reason why Orpheus goes down to Hadestown in the first place. The story ends as soon as the trial is over. You know, when Eurydice is lost forever, and then the story restarts. How's that for a hot take? Part 2. Orpheus's Doubt. Okay, this is the one that everyone gets mad about. Why the hell did Orpheus turn around? Well, we just went through Eurydice's part. I don't know what you thought was going to happen. Actually, that was the point of the entirety of Road to Hell, to wrap the story in a little bow with a note that says, "Dead dove do not eat." And still you go through the thrill of opening it up. What, Pandora, did you expect? When people leave you after promising they'll stay by your side without even telling you why they left, you will end up questioning whether or not they'll actually go with you when they apologize and try the second time. They never grew from apologizing to each other. They just promised each other they'll do it side by side. Something they didn't even get to do because Hades made sure that was never going to happen. So, why the hell did he turn around? It's complicated. Poets argue that it's there to teach people that you should go down to the underworld and argue the world order. Some of them argue that it's just plain anxiety. Ovid agreed on that take, but thousands of years later, it's still up for debate. Take this scene from Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a film from 2019. This one has a take from this that makes me want to scream my head off. Spikima explained it best.
Marianne states something very intriguing. She says,
Il ne fait pas le choix de l'amoureux, il fait le choix du poète.
yes, instead of making the lover's choice, he makes the poet's choice. Eloise takes a moment to let that statement sink in and adds,
Peut-être que c'est elle qui lui a dit. Retourne-toi.
she will end up with a poet's choice, to keep Eloise in her memory by leaving alone. In fact, later in the film, Marianne constantly turns around at night to see Eloise in her wedding dress just fade away. This idea haunts her throughout. And at this point, some may ask how she sees the actual dress in advance. The mother arrives and it's time for them to say goodbye. Overwhelmed with emotion, Marianne turns and runs downstairs, keeping herself from crying. As she opens the door to leave,
Retourne-toi.
Good fucking god, that gets me every time. Anyway, Mitchell's version of the story stays true to Ovid's take, with few liberties taken. Orpheus makes a decision to turn around based solely on how he's lost faith in himself, which is canonical, but what's more fascinating is its framing. Orpheus is an idealistic artist who believes he can change the turning of the seasons with a song. No one in the story tells him this. He is just very upfront about it. He's the most self-assured person about this, in the live recording especially. In a non-recorded version of Come Home With Me, he's cocky enough to say shit like this. No one even openly acknowledges any kind of godly heritage he might have. Hermes just says,
But his mama was a friend of mine.
in the original text, he is the son of Calliope.
Calliope.
In the original text, he's the son of Calliope. And he never really gets rid of that. He's incredibly confident about his ability to change the seasons with a single song. Who he doesn't trust is Hades, which came a bit out of the blue, honestly. That's a plot hole then, you may say, because they never established Orpheus being untrustworthy of Hades. And, well, true. But in all of Mitchell's adaptations, Broadway brought it to a new level. Because on Broadway, Orpheus is just some dude. I suppose you can just read it as a later adaptation of Orpheus. Godly heritage and stories like the Iliad per se was only really relevant if your parent was involved in the story. And in this tale, neither Apollo nor Calliope get directly involved. By all means, Orpheus is just a dude with weird eldritch powers that compels the world with his song. An ability he doesn't doubt. In Broadway, Orpheus reflects that. So when we go back to the question, why the fuck did he turn around? Orpheus doesn't doubt Eurydice's lack of presence. Again, he loves his wife very much. Or Hades' promise in the first place. That is sacrilegious. He doubts himself. Not his ability, not his love. Himself. He doesn't believe he has the right to drag her back to life because he neglected her. He doesn't believe Hades should believe in him that fast just because he was convincing. Our homeboy Orpheus acquired a new skill. Self-doubt. And boy, does that cost him. Just shaking his hand. That's what it's like to enter college. Part 3. Hades' love. If you demonized Hades in any way, shape, or form before due to societal conditioning, raise your hand. Mitchell doesn't shy away from this either. By all means, it's an apt allegory to make Hades the CEO of Capitalism Town, responsible for global warming, because he is a god. He can technically cause that much chaos. But does this Hades reflect the rest of mythological canon? No. Not even a little. The one thing that Mitchell did get right here is that he is Greece's godly male wife personified. Hades loves Persephone, and we'll get to the topic of their marriage in the next part, I promise. But this fact never changed since the beginning of time. Minte and Perseus being two, but none of them were necessarily things that could make or break the marriage, like sexually assaulting other women. Hades' marriage to Persephone was a traditional one in canon, and depending on which Mitchell version you're listening to, this kinda was too. This is most apparent in the live version, and in some deleted lines they had for chant reprise in the West End version that they cut pre-Broadway. Persephone talked about how she and Hades used to be so sweet on each other, and how they didn't even need the marriage bed. They basically full-on eloped in the live version. And that's a stark contrast to Mr. Manipulate Gatekeep Male Wife. That abrupt decision to do it is believably the reason why their marriage was so fraught in this story over time, you know? In the live version and the Broadway version, Hades' love for Persephone is the thing that keeps driving the plot. He doesn't entice Eurydice to coming to Hadestown until after chant. This is the most transparent it can be in the live version when Persephone opens How Long with these fucking lines.
How long have we been married? Since the world began. I don't mind if you look at other girls. Now and then. The girl means nothing to me. I know. But she means everything to him.
I'm going to need a moment. Intermission. So, how are we doing so far, guys? It's 1:07 a.m. right now. Happy Pride, everyone. I wasn't kidding when I said this draft took me too many times to count. Is it good so far? If it is, tell me what you think is the best song from which version of Hadestown that you like the most. And, how'd you guys get into Hadestown? Better yet, how the hell did you find this video? Oh, did you guys know I wrote up a number Junuber's Hadestown fusion fic last year? That's how I got really into this. It's up on IO3, I'll link it in the description. I don't know if it's as good as I thought it was, but yeah. Alright, back to business. Part 3, Hades' Love, continued. So, what makes this version of Male Wife so compelling in this adaptation? Well, I suppose it's because Mitchell and company really made Hades their own character and wrote him as in love with his wife as he could be. Most people could spot it a mile away in his literal introduction to this story. He comes to the surface saying he misses his wife, so he came early. He tries to make Hadestown more appealing to her, just to make her stay longer there. He wants to spend time with her enough to make it full time. And to juxtapose this with Orpheus's development of self-doubt in the Broadway version, the addition of Hades' motivations to keep Persephone came from the concept album, but was conceived in the live version. In all versions of How Long, Persephone says,
All of his sorrow won't fit in his chest. It just burns like fire in the pit of his chest, and his heart is burned on a spit in his chest.
And Hades, in the same song, echoes it, but compares it to his own feelings towards her. Perhaps the first time he's been diegetically vulnerable with how much he wants her.
You and your pity don't fit in my bed. You just burn like a fire in the pit of my bed, and I turn like a bird on a spit in my bed.
And this is what Hades' love is, a fire in his chest that won't stop burning. And since he wants to keep his love where he can have it, he keeps trying to add things to the enclosure to really liven the place up, thinking that she'll never come back if she finds something on the surface like he did. That is infinitely more compelling than the way most people write Hades and his love for Persephone, I think. Which is more akin to Peter Quint and Rebecca Jessel in The Haunting of Bly Manor. Which, you know, abusive. And his love for her doesn't excuse the consequences of his actions. And Orpheus holding him accountable with how he's been trying to keep Persephone in Hadestown forces him to realize that if he really does love her, he'll be able to trust her to come and go as she pleases. That they entered this union together. That they fell in love with each other. Orpheus doesn't really guilt trip him into acknowledging the fact that him coming up early to take her back home ended up killing people, but that's his prerogative, I guess. So much for revolutionary undertones. Cool motive, Hades. Still destroying the earth. Part 4. Persephone's humanity. The one odd thing I never got from reviewers of this particular franchise was the decision to reinterpret Persephone's agency. Most people, the author of War Olympus included, interpreted Persephone and Hades' marriage as non-consensual and sexual assaulty, which is kind of a false interpretation of the original text. Overly Sarcastic Productions did a detailed breakdown of the story in this video, but the long and short of it is that in ancient Greek times, Hades didn't even come close to sexual assault, and did the proper thing any suitor would have done at that time. Ask her parent for her hand in marriage. Persephone, for all intents and purposes, didn't have reason to turn down a rich and handsome suitor, and yes, I mean that in the Pride and Prejudice way, not in the literal way. But in Mitchell's story, Persephone and Hades alone, at least in the live version. The only thing explicit in the concept album and the Broadway version was the courtship stage of their relationship. The live version itself is actually the most fleshed out Persephone was. You can see the way that their marriage soured in her point of view in chant number 2, or chant reprise, however the fuck you say that. She has this verse.
When I was a young girl like you, sister, I was hungry too. Hungry for the underworld. When I was a young girl, now you know how it tastes. The fruit of Mr. Hades' ways. Sister, it's a bitter wine. Spit it out while you still have time. Take it from a woman of my age. Love is not a gilded cage. All the wealth within these walls will never buy the thing called love. Love was when he came to me, begging on his bended knees to please have pity on his heart and let him lay me in the dirt. I felt his arms around me then. We didn't need a wedding bed. Dark seeds scattered on the ground. The wild birds are flying around. That's when I became his wife. But that was in another life. That was in another world when I was a young girl.
Which is a lot to take in, really. But the long and short of it is that she fell in love with Hades' vulnerability around her and almost even revered her. In the live version of the story, Hades emphasizes the need to bind her, telling you that he's lost the reverence for his wife and practically took for granted the idea that she was the one who let him take her home to begin with. But the messiness of her anger is so good. The decision to make her a substance user to cope with having been kept for too long, far too often. The idea to make it so she gives the shades of the underworld things that make them reminisce just so she can have someone to commiserate with. And her wallowing in self-pity is what leads to the fact that spring is always late, never early. In the live version of Chant, Hermes tells the audience that Hades and Persephone have the same spat every year, and in those spats, she never says anything about how this wasn't part of the deal. Because if you haven't caught on yet, Persephone is conditionally required to leave Hadestown to change the seasons. In all those years of being married and having the same fight with Hades about how much she didn't like that Hades kept making changes to Hadestown to make her stay longer, she never once told him that she wanted or even had to leave. And that doesn't make her character suck. Au contraire, that makes her human. She wants Hades to get a clue. They're both adults. She shouldn't have to tell him why she needs to leave the place every 6 months for exactly 6 months. Hades shouldn't have to be babied every time she has to leave. They're both stubborn to a fault, and that leads to consequences. The one criticism I do have of her character is always that she never seemed to face the consequences of that diegetically. She and Hades work through their emotions. She gets to leave until autumn and everything just goes back to normal. No one acknowledges that though she was in a difficult situation, it was still her responsibility to keep the seasons going. Hell, remember Minthe? What about her spat with Aphrodite about Adonis? It's not unusual for Persephone to be aggressive about things like her emotions. It's not a downgrade, I mind though. Persephone kind of just stole the show whenever she was on, so I didn't mind if she was on for longer. But they didn't make her be on for longer. I just like Amber Gray. Conclusions. Hadestown is one hell of a musical. Pun intended. It's known for its acknowledgement of the meta, its music, the stage direction, the casting. It's a really good production, and it's a fantastic retelling of these two myths. It's original and familiar, all in one, and it just gets better with each re-listen. Or rewatch, according to some people. I've never been to a show. I got really into the story at the beginning of quarantine. Then I got really into the production of the story itself, like how it was made. I got into it so much that it was in my Spotify rap for 2020. Mostly because I was writing that fic that I told you about. Like, I'm not even kidding about the Spotify rap. It was the entire album in there. Ugh. Okay. But with the production crew touring again this summer, I do hope more people will grow to appreciate the story. Maybe this time they'll have their own... I mean, with that comes new bootlegs, right? No, I'm kidding. Maybe they'll film it this time. Then I can really buy the fucking tape. Anyway. If you've gotten this far and still haven't listened to Hadestown, take this video as incentive. If you end up hating it, go off in the comments. Fucking say it to my face. Right. I think that about wraps this up. Thanks again for coming and listening to me ramble about this. This is a way longer video than I thought it was gonna be. But I hope you had fun listening all the way through. Like the video if you did. Comment, subscribe if you want. Big shout out to Buttons who bullied me into making this. And to maybe Jeanette, if I make Jeanette do the lines for some of these. Anyway, happy Pride. Ingat tayong lahat. Bye!